let's start with the well, how about tools? Like, okay, what do I need to start to put a garden in? And I'm just going to put a small garden in my backyard. Maybe let's do this. Maybe something flower bed size or bigger. Maybe 10 by 20 garden spot. What kind of tools should I be thinking about getting that would be useful for me to have? Number one, and then number two, what would be tools that I don't have to have that would make gardening nicer?
Okay, that's another
And then
compliment.
maybe number three, I want to add to that. Any pro tips you have on tools? Like, okay, this is an expensive tool, but if you bought this, it lasts you a long time. You don't have to have this to garden. Or if you're going to get this particular, you're going to get a tool. If you got this tool, it's going to be a lot of money, but it's going to be really nice. So basic tools, what do I need? What would be nice to have? And then any pro tips.
Okay, so to back up a little bit, whatever your end result is, why are you gardening? If it's because you mentioned 10 by 20, that's a pretty good, that's a large space that you can grow a lot in actually. So if you're going to have a potted plant, obviously you don't need a lot of tools. If you're doing a full-fledged garden, you know, you want some food independence, or you want to really supplement your, you know, your table with fresh produce every meal, then yes, you're going to have a larger area like that. And a lot of, and like any profession you're in, Chris used to do carpentry, any mechanic, any carpenter, any painter will tell you tools make the difference. And when I first started out,
Let me ask real quick. Okay. So you said a 10 by 20 is really big. What would you recommend for someone that's just wanting to add food to their table and to grow things? This is kind of their first garden. Maybe they're just trying it out. What would you say, 10 by 10? Would that be a better size? And then based on that, we can talk about tools that you would need.
mm-hmm. So I guess let me address it like this. So once you know what you want to do, first thing you do is start small. Like Chris mentioned, if you, a lot of people, first time gardeners will get out there and they will plant, you know, 500 zucchini plants. That's a lot of zucchini. You know, yeah. Or I know somebody who was starting out and they went and they bought 100 tomato plants. That's a lot of tomatoes. So you need to figure out what you want to do. Start small, and once you start small, you get comfortable with that. Once you know what you're doing, you can obviously add. The neat thing, especially here in the South, we have a larger growing area than, you know, somebody up north. So we have a longer time to play with. And so if you plant 2 tomato plants, you think, okay, I'm doing well. You can always go and you can plant a couple more tomato plants and then a couple more after that. So it's a matter of being comfortable with what you're doing. What I don't want, one, I don't want you doing, I don't want you doing nothing. And 2, I don't want you doing so much that when you get out there, you're overwhelmed, you're discouraged, and you're like, I'm never going to do this again.
So a beginner's size garden spot.
So start with, yeah, start with what you think you can manage. Maybe a 5 by 5 spot, and try that out. And like I said, you can have a larger spot, or you can have a 10 by 10. You can have a 10 by 20, but just kind of section out a smaller area where you can go. You can start planting. I know there's a lot of people say just go out there and plant. There's different opinions, but from my personal experience, if you get overwhelmed, you become discouraged and you pretty much end up doing nothing. So I always tell people start small. Once you conquer that, go wider.
So Eric Flickinger just sent a message in chat that he's thinking about getting a tractor. Would you think that's an appropriate tool? I mean, is that something, 4-wheel drive tractor with a front end loader? Yeah, okay, I just saw that. All right, good, Eric. Good choice. What kind of tools would you recommend that we need, including a tractor, of course?
Eric's planning to grow for his whole neighborhood, I'm assuming, with a tractor. That's a big tractor. A good tractor. The tractors are beneficial for many reasons. You know, I have a tractor and I use it for multiple things. You know, I fill holes. It's very versatile. But for my gardening, I don't use tractors very often. I have a spot that's 50 by 50. And as far as tools, I'm going to show you some of, I'm not just going to tell you, but I'm going to show you. And that way, you'll have kind of an idea. One of the things that I do is once I know what I want to, I have my plan. I know what I want to grow. And a simple rule of thumb, there's a guy who's kind of the godfather of modern organic growing. His name is Elliot Coleman. And if you Google Elliot Coleman, you're going to find probably 6 maybe books by him. Very good resource. Elliot Coleman did something, he kind of standardized rows. And he said, if it doesn't matter how long your row is going to be, it's going to be 12 feet, 30 feet, 100 feet, make it 30 inches wide. Because those rows are easy to manage. And the reason Elliot Coleman, I wouldn't have chosen 30 inches, but the reason Elliot Coleman chose 30 inches is he can straddle those, that row. I'm short, 30 inches is a stretch for me. That's why I wouldn't have chosen 30. But a lot of tools that people are now designing are based around Elliot Coleman's model. So you have, let's say, a 10-foot row, a 5-foot row, a 30-foot row by 30 inches. You can do a lot in there. So let's say in my 50-foot row by 30 inches, I'll do a tomato plant every 2 feet. And that's going to give me a lot of tomatoes. And, we're going to have fresh eating tomatoes and also tomatoes to grow with. We'll come back. I use tomatoes because everybody likes that, and it's an easy plant to work with.
You put tomatoes 2 feet apart, space them 2 feet apart on 30-inch rows.
Correct. Correct. And so, Gideon, thank you. My son just brought one of my tools, this thing here, and I'm going to back up right here. It's called a broad fork. And my posts are missing, they broke, I have to replace them. But this, this is 12 inches deep. And once I prep my area, every time, and I'll explain how this works. Every time, would you hold that please? Every time I remove a plant and I do a new crop, I will get that broad fork. I have another one. This is this right here. This is called a hard pan. The other one is a regular broad fork, which is 30 inches. This one's a little bit smaller. It's called a hard pan broad fork. The tines are a little bit thicker. And this one, I have this because of the Georgia clay. Georgia and Tennessee have similar red clay, which is extremely difficult to work with. The other one, if you looked at it, you would see it's well worn. I've used it, I've bent it many times. Would you take that, please? And so I have the 2 different ones. The 30 inch is really good. Once the bed is done, I go through several things you need to grow. Really simple: nitrogen, air, microbes, organic material. And one of the ways to get air into your garden is with that broad fork. I use it, you step on it, and you basically lift your soil. You're aerating soil.
I got a question for you. I think that would push into my ground about an inch, maybe 2. I don't know. If Faith jumped on it with me, maybe another 1/4 of an inch. I don't know. I mean, is that something you have to like get a tractor and till up the ground before you use, and then every year you use it after that, or do you think now that it's rained for months on end, it should just slide right in?
I started with a pickaxe, a shovel, and that was what I first started with.
Okay.
And the broad fork will go in. It's actually, especially the hard pan one, is designed for this area. You'll go a little bit deeper than 2 inches. And if all you can go is 6 inches, you start with that 6 inches. If you can go 8 inches, you start with that 8 inches. And you work your ground and you prep it. Your whatever, let's say 10 foot by 30 inches. And you just basically lift. You can go in there. If you have a small tiller, I'm not opposed to tillers. The problem with tillers is after a while, to start, I tell everybody, if you have a tiller, use it. But what tillers will do is, a tiller is only so long. Those tines are so long. And what happens is as it's spinning, everything within this area is being loosened. But everything below the tiller is actually being beaten down, and it creates something called hard pan.
Yeah.
And that underneath gets so hard. So if you're just starting out and you want to loosen that soil, go ahead and use a tiller. But I would encourage you the next year, get something like a, they're about $150, $170 depending on where you buy them. They're not cheap, but I've used.
Is there a certain brand you recommend that will not break?
There's a company called Johnny Seeds, johnnyseeds.com. Makes a really good one. There's another company, and they're out of Maine. There's another company called, oh, it's on the tip of my, Haas. Give me a second. Yes, Haas Tools, Hoss. And they're basically southern Georgia, and they make a good one. And then there's another company in California, and
You said HASS?
HOSS.
Haas Seeds?
Haas Tools.
Haas?
Yeah, they're starting to sell seeds. Initially, they only did tools, but they're starting to sell seeds as well. And there's another company out of California, and I'll think of the name here in a second. They also, you can get them on Amazon, but I have no experience with them. I know that not all broad forks are made the same. Some of them will snap. Some of them can't, withstand the durability. They'll bend. The metal just isn't strong enough. And these three companies I'm very familiar with, and they all three have really good products. It looks like we have a few other people on here. I'm just curious. I see another Jerry. I wanted to see if he was the.
No.
He dropped off. Oh, Susan's iPhone. I'm curious to know who Susan's iPhone is.
Susan Pratt.
Hi, Susan.
Oh, okay.
Hi,
There's
guys.
another. Hi, Susan. There's another Jerry I'm waiting for, and his wife's name is Susan. So I was wondering.
Oh,
Him.
So Daniel,
sorry, it's only me.
a broad fork is useful to use to break up the ground. Okay. And then if we don't have that, we're just doing a small plot, 5 by 5, we could use a pick and a shovel. And how deep down would you go if you were going to pick and a shovel? The same, about 10, 12 inches, just to give space for the roots to kind of do their thing?
You really want about 12 inches, and that's why the broad fork's designed there. A lot of people say, like, modern commercial farming will go down to about 4 to 6 inches. And the problem with that is a lot of times the nutrient of that soil usually is in the lower area. So if you can go down about 12 inches, you can get the full benefit of all the nutrients that are in there. And then every time, with the broad fork, you get out there, you aerate that, you get a shovel, you turn it, you're basically mixing the minerals. Because as you plant throughout the season, those minerals will either go to the bottom or they'll wash out. So the purpose of using something like a broad fork and a shovel is to, bring the minerals up. The tiller does the same thing. The problem with the tiller is I've used tillers and I've gone in with an area that was just rich with earthworms. And usually what happens is by the time you get done beating that soil, the earthworms are dead. And like I said, that layer that you've just beaten, tillers can go, I think the most a tiller will go is about 8 inches, but everything below that is just really beat down and hard pan. So instead of going out and buying a tractor, which is a good idea if you're going to do a large area. The problem with the tractor is if you're doing a 10 by 10, it makes it difficult depending on the size of the tractor. With hand tools, it makes it a little bit easier, and you can do a smaller plot. Now, if you're going to do an area that's 100 by 100, or I had an area that was 178 by 20, a tractor really comes in handy, and especially when you're wanting to turn that soil. But when you're trying to maneuver something like this 50 by 50, and I have a tractor, and I have used it out there, and it's like, anybody who's used a tractor, that's a small area to work in. So with using the hand tools, you're able to work those smaller areas.
So I got a question that came in here, which I think is a good one. Is so when you're trying to choose a spot for a garden, this is Nita asked this question. For a vegetable garden, what criteria are you looking for? Shade? If you want it in the sun, how many hours of sun? What if you have some hills? Do you want the side of the hill, the top of the hill, the bottom of the hill? What criteria would be best for an optimum garden? I mean, realizing that you have to use what you have, but what are some factors that you would use to pick the spot?
It's a very good question. In an ideal world, you'd be able to pick that. Unfortunately, I've not had the luxury in the places that I've lived. So I usually, you go and you find the most level area. It's nice to have an area that isn't too level, because when it rains, you know, that water will just settle there. A slight slope is okay. It's not bad. You don't want totally flat. Totally flat's fine, but whatever you have, if you have the option to choose, you want sunlight. You want as much sunlight as you can get. You want good drainage, and the area doesn't have to be perfect. Ideally, if it is, then that makes it, you know, that's a good thing. But basically, wherever you can get the most sunlight. And I actually got a question. I told somebody they weren't sure because they had a lot of wood. They lived on a wooded lot with lots of trees around. And I told them to basically keep a journal. Go out there, walk out there at certain times of the, you know, the day. Go out at 6 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, to see when the sun is actually hitting the area they want to plant in. I'm sorry. And then, you know, start going out there at 4 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, to see when the sun leaves that area. And you want to know how much sunlight you have in that area. Ideally, plants like minimum 8 hours of sunlight. You can get away with less, but the less you go, the harder it is to have a good crop. But you want an area that's going to have good sunlight. That's probably one of the most important. And again, drainage. You don't want someplace that when it rains, all the water is pooling there. I have a friend who the best area, the richest area in his yard, he went ahead and planted, and it was a really good area. It turned out that year was a decent year. The next year,
It's telling stories here. Let's look up.
I'm going to mute. Sorry. The next year, they ended up getting a lot of rain, and for most of the summer, that garden was underwater. So he couldn't do anything. So you want to definitely observe that. Start as soon as you can. You get out there, you observe it to see how much water is settling in that area. If it's known to settle water and maintain water, you don't want to plant there. You definitely want good drainage.
So Daniel, let's jump back to the tools. We talked about the broad fork. Okay, just a couple of other quick tools that you'd recommend. I'm assuming some sort of a hoe.
So this little guy right here.
Oh, what is that?
A three-prong. It's a three-prong cultivator. And this guy here, I actually really like this guy. Once you have planted, you know, and you're, sorry, my daughter's over there and I'm swinging this. Once you've planted, the ground tends to get a little bit hard. And with this thing, you just go out there and you can scratch the surface of that ground, loosen everything up. Or let's say you're getting ready to plant and you have some calcium that you put in the growing area. This is another good thing. Instead of like a tiller, you basically just go out there and you go back and forth, and this, you know, moves that into the soil. So it's good for mixing. It's good for weeding as well. If you just want to loosen the soil around the plants, like tomato plants, there's a bunch of weeds. This is not my favorite for weeding. You can use it, and I have used it. I'll show you another one for weeding, but this is called a three-tine cultivator. I bought this one from Johnny's Seeds, and I know you can find them on Amazon. This one, if I remember correctly, cost me about $80. It's well made. I've had this. I had another one like this that lasted me 1 season. This one I've had probably five years.
That's beautiful.
So
nice. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
My parents have a garden and they have a drainage problems. Do you have any solution for that?
Okay, let me circle back around to that one.
Sorry.
This one is called a horseshoe weeder, or stirrups. I'm sorry, not horseshoe. Thank you, Galina. My daughter knows how to use these. All my children do. And it's funny. I have 3 different hoes. This is a hoe. And my wife, she has a favorite. My daughter has a favorite. I have a favorite. This is my wife's favorite. And it's sharp on both ends. And it moves. I don't know if you can see that. It moves a little bit. And when you're weeding with this guy, you go back and forth. And it allows you to go both directions. And you know, to lift the soil. You basically just want to go, the best time to weed is when you see the weeds coming out, and usually about 2 weeks. So what I like to do is 2 weeks after I plant everything, that's when you start seeing the weeds. I will go out and use either this one or one of my other hoes, not the 3-tine cultivator, that's for other things. And I will just, below the surface, just scratch it. And what I'm doing is killing all those weeds. I'll wait another 2 weeks. I know one of the questions I'm going to get is weed control. So 2 weeks after you plant, that's when you start to see them. They're small enough to deal with. Don't wait until they get big. Go out there and use this guy. You're going to get some exercise. If you have a, like my garden is, like I said, 50 by 50. And about, I don't know, 15 minutes, I can go through every row with this 2 weeks after planting. And then you wait another 2 weeks, you do it again because, no, yeah, sorry, I have several people talking to me. 2 weeks after that, again, the weeds will be about this high, you go through again. And that will help suppress your weed problems, you know, throughout the entire growing season. Don't wait until you see them this big, then you're pulling them. That's gonna take a lot more time. I'm telling you, in a 50 by 50, 15 minutes with this, massive weed control. The other one I have is a collinear hoe. Sorry, this one just recently got broken. This one actually, so picture this over here. It's kind of straight. This is my favorite. My wife despises this one, but it's my favorite. And it's about, you know, over here. And it's sharp on one end. You can only go one end. Normally you're pulling it towards you. And again, it does the same thing as as the stirrup hoe. It's just a different style, and I really like this one as well. And this one was about $80 at Johnny's Seeds. I have to replace this, which I'm going to do probably this week. But anyways, that's another one. And my third hoe is the one that everybody is familiar with. And they're making these now that are actually shorter. I'm probably going to order one of those, and I like that. It gives me, I don't have as much real estate. You can weed with this really well. I use it, actually all 3 of these I use. It's just each of us in my family has our favorite. One of my daughters, I don't remember which one, used to like this one a lot. And basically, you know, this is more of a chopping or a scraping. And this one is good for like a larger weed. This is for dealing with like larger weed, which is good to have. The shorter one that I'm going to order would be for like a smaller weed. That's more of prevention. This one does a little bit more than prevention. This is more of, you have more serious weeds to deal with, versus the other 2 are more prevention. If you take that, please. So those are some, I definitely highly recommend getting a good hoe, one that you're going to like, one that you're comfortable with. I'm short, but I still like the longer handles. For example, I bought one at Home Depot that had a shorter handle, and you know, even short, found myself bending over. I went to Ace Hardware because Ace tends to sell longer handles than Home Depot or Lowe's, and I bought myself a longer handle. And I just swapped it out, and I ended up loving that tool. I hated it at first using it, but you know, I find that the longer the handle, the easier it is to work with. And I definitely recommend longer handled hoes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for those tips. It was nice to be able to see them. I've been typing this up in the chat on the side, so if anyone wants to see that, it will be there, and you can reference some of these things later. So, all right, Daniel, so I've got the tools I need, I've picked the spot I need, and I've worked up the ground. I haven't been able to prepare the soil, you know, last fall or whatever, what should I do now? I want to plant something this spring, so I probably should be thinking about what I'm going to plant, and then is there some sort of fertilizer I need to be thinking about? Do I need to go visit to the next, the horse barn next door? What should I be doing?
Okay, I'm sharing. Can you guys see that picture?
Oh, yeah, black plastic.
Okay, so in Georgia, Tennessee area, we've been getting a lot of rain, and I've been wanting to plant in the worst way, but I've not been able to. And a few weeks ago, we had a couple days break. I think it was 3 days with no rain. So I hurried my family out, and we went and we worked this area so that it's pretty close to being ready to plant. And what I did is I knew rain was coming. Actually, it was coming that evening. And so I went and I covered it. And the purpose of this is black plastic that I got from Home Depot. And the reason in this area is, if I remember correctly, this is another area I have. This is, do you remember what this is? 10 by 19, 10 by 20? 10 by, let's just go with 10 by 20, I believe. And I covered it with plastic. And it's been sitting there. And as soon as we can get a really good day, yesterday was really good, we're going to get out there and we're going to plant it. And the reason is you don't want to be working that soil when it's saturated and when it's wet. When you start working really wet soil, it destroys the microorganisms in the soil. And you want to make sure that you're keeping those microorganisms, because the microorganisms really is what is going to feed the plants, the nutrients. I had a massive learning curve. I always thought that when you put minerals and fertilizer in the soil, it feeds the plant. It doesn't. What you're actually doing, that's a misconception. You want to feed the microorganisms, and those microorganisms will feed the soil. It was kind of neat. I had feed the plant. My cheerleading squad's over here, my family, so they're correcting me. Sometimes my mind and my mouth don't connect. But I had a eureka moment, and I remember those of you who have read the Desire of Ages, there's a reference in there where it's called the Circuit of Beneficence. And in God, we see this picture of servant, always serving. And once I got into gardening, I totally understood that picture so much more, because I recognized that when you're dealing with the soil, you're feeding the microorganisms. You're self-sacrificing to feed them. Once you feed them, the neat thing is these microorganisms self-sacrifice and actually feed the plant. And then what does the plant do? The plant turns around and gives it back to feed me. So that there's this, circuit of beneficence. I'm benefiting them, they're benefiting the plant is, benefiting me. It's not New Age, it's just, it's a revelation of our Creator and, his character of servitude. So once I recognized that and I saw that, I thought that was so neat. And I had to totally change my mindset that when I'm feeding is the microorganisms, not the plant. And so, I know one of the questions I'm going to get, I'm organic. I do not use any Roundup. I don't use any 10-10-10 or Miracle Grow. I'm strictly organic. I do not, I've done both. And the food tastes better. I have less pest problems. Believe it or not, it sounds like an oxymoron, but I've had less pest problems after becoming organic than when I was using, synthetic fertilizers and
Wow.
different things. So it takes a while. It doesn't happen immediately, but in 2 to 3 years, once you become organic, your pest pressure decreases massively.
So Kevin has made a comment here. He's got plenty of horse manure if anyone would like to get some. So is there any concerns about using fresh horse manure, or should it be?
Horse manure is my least favorite, but I never, no, hold on. Thank you, Kevin. Horse manure is so if I were to use manure, I don't know if you guys can see behind me, I have some chickens out there. Chicken manure is one of the best manures you can get. It's extremely high in nitrogen, but you don't want to put it right on the plants because it will burn it. So what you do is you put it in before you plant, let it, get in there for about a week, let the rain hit it and let it start breaking down before you start planting, because it'll be too much, it'll burn your plant. The next best would be rabbit, believe it or not, rabbit manure. The third best would be cow. The fourth would be horse. The problem with horse manure is horses have a different digestive system than any of the other animals that I've mentioned. And so horse manure tends to be more weedy, and you're going to get a lot of weeds growing up in that. I remember one year I went and I got a pickup load, 2 pickup loads of horse manure. I mean, that thing was heaping. My truck looked like a lowrider. It was barely moving, and I thought, oh man, I'm going to have a good garden this year. And I put it on there, and that stuff grew like it was on steroids, but the weeds grew. I fought weeds for the next 2 years because of that. In an area that I knew I didn't have weeds. And so then I learned from an old farmer what my problem was. And he told me that if you ever use horse manure, you need to make sure that it's good and aged for a couple of years. Now, I did end up getting some horse manure after that, and I learned there's a way to do it quicker. You pile it up and you add something to it, add some dirt to it or something. You don't just want the horse manure, but add some dirt to it. And some leaves, and just cover it with a tarp and just let it sit there for a season. If you can turn it once or twice that season, that'll be good. But do not put, from personal experience and from others who I know have gone through it, just regular horse manure. And so I think, Kevin, and it's not a bad idea, and I say get it. It's just don't plan on using it this year. Plan on using it next year.
Okay.
Chicken, rabbit, cow, you can use immediately. But again, you want to make sure that you put it on, give it a week or two to start to break down, because it'll be too hot for the plants.
Okay, so we put the plastic on the ground before we work it up or after we work it up?
I worked mine up because I wanted it to be mostly ready. It's not. We were rushing. My family had to leave, and the rain was coming. So we had a small window, and I knew I had 3 days for it to dry out, because you guys know that live in this area, it's been so wet, and you really want the ground to be as dry as possible to work it. You want a little bit of moisture, but you don't want it to be wet. And so there were 3 days that we had where we had no rain, and on that third day we just ran outside and we worked that area. And we had previous beds there, strawberries. We had to pull those up and get rid of them. I'm doing something different there this year. And so I prepped it mostly, and then I covered it until we can get back out there, on a good day and work it. So I would encourage you, if you can't work it right now because it's wet, just put a tarp down. And what that will start to do is help keep the rain away from the area. The other thing it will do is, let's say you have grass planted there and you want to work that area. If you tarp that for 2 to 3 weeks, when you get ready to till that area, all that grass will be dead. It'll do the work for you and save you a lot of work.
Does it make a difference if I use clear plastic versus black plastic?
It does make a difference. Clear plastic doesn't work as well. Weeds are amazing things. Whereas the grass will die, many of the weeds will thrive under that clear plastic, because what will happen is that'll create a greenhouse effect and give them this happy, cozy environment. So you want a dark plastic. The other thing is, clear plastic tends to fry the microorganisms. So if you have earthworms if you put the black plastic on, those earthworms will be happy and start moving around and different things because the area is warming up. The clear plastic will fry them, and then, that's less microorganisms and earthworms you have in that area.
Daniel, Carla had a question here about mushroom compost or earthworm
Stuff.
Yeah.
I love mushroom compost. However, you have to know your source. I don't have firsthand experience, but there was a well-known gardener in the Chattanooga area, and he used to do a lot of gardening for Southern. And he went and he found in his mushroom compost, he found some syringes in there. And what they were doing was they were inoculating that with some sort of bacteria to help increase the growth. And I've heard another person say it. I've not personally experienced it, but you need to know your source, where you're getting it from. You also want to make sure that it's an organic source, which is getting more and more difficult, because sometimes mushroom compost isn't always the purist, but I love mushroom compost. I bought a 22 cubic feet of that a few years ago and used it all. So yeah, I love that stuff.
Do you know of a source in the Chattanooga area that's reputable?
There were 2 of them and they're gone. I haven't purchased, because I've been out west, I haven't purchased from the Cleveland, what's that place called? Up in Cleveland. Bailey's Feed and Seed, I believe it was called. It's Bailey's something. And it's in Cleveland. And I used to buy a lot from there. Years ago, I found another source that was up in Nashville, and I would buy it by the tandem load, like I said, 22 cubic feet. But I haven't bought from Bailey's in, I don't know, 10 years, but they were a good source and I really did like them.
Okay, I found a place called Beatty Hardware.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beatty Hardware.
They were a good source. You know, I haven't checked them recently, but they were a good source. And that's it. Basically, it's called earthworm castings. I'm sorry, compost. Sorry, mushroom compost. Another thing that I like even better than mushroom compost is earthworm castings, and Beatty's had it as well. Earthworm castings, I think, is a better product than mushroom compost. Very similar. They're both organic matter. They're going to give you, one's going to give you a little bit more potash, and one's going to give you a little bit more sulfur, but they're pretty much the same thing.
So do I need to test my soil, or should I just get some of this stuff and dump it on there, or with a horse manure that's been seasoned and mix it in? Or do you just put it along where you plant stuff?
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking for my pictures and I can't find it. So the organic material, your microorganisms need food. And what the organic matter does is it provides food to the microorganisms. It also provides good drainage. So in this area, we have a lot of clay. Any organic matter you put into that clay is going to improve that soil. One of the things that I did this year myself, I bought a truckload of sand. I have an area that's just, I put calcium. I've been putting calcium. I probably put 200 pounds of calcium in that 50 by 50 spot. And this year I just bought a dump truck load of sand. And what I'm going to do is mix that in, and I usually do 1-to-1. So on a 30-inch bed, my tractor is a yard. I do about 1-2 scoops in that area, which is 50 by 30 inch. But I'm going, 12 inches deep. So I'm trying to loosen that soil. Plants like microorganisms, and they like drainage. They want to drain if water's pooling there. And this somewhat answers Susan's question, about her parents. The thing you need to do is to improve drainage is you need to get organic matter in there. And like I said, sand. Sand is a good thing. You can spend hundreds of dollars buying calcium, which will accomplish it. Or you can go and buy, a tote at Home Depot, or you can buy a tandem load like me. It cost me, I think it was $800, and I bought, 22 cubic feet of sand, and we're, mixing that in the area to improve the drainage. And you had a second part to that question. What was your, I'm trying to remember.
To Susan's question?
I thought there was a second part to that question.
The compost. Should you just put it? It sounds like you're trying to mix it in to make the soil, and feed the microorganisms. Now, Carla had a question here about the soil. What if you have red clay and a little topsoil? How much calcium? And she was, what kind of ratio per square foot? I think Carla's is probably similar to a lot of us. We've got red clay.
It's a difficult question to answer because not every soil, unfortunately, is the same. So there's no cookie cutter answer. What you can do is do a soil test. The best thing you can do is do a soil test. And you go to the Cleveland, if you go to the Cleveland Co-op, you can find them on the internet. I've used them before. And you let them know you want to send their soil for a soil analysis. They will send it off. I recommend doing them because the labs that they work with I like, and also they're going to be cheaper than going to your local county extension office or going directly to the labs. Cleveland, because they send so many there, they get a discount. About 4 years ago, they were $15. But let me touch on that really quick. If you're doing an area, let's say my area 50 by 50, and I want to send it for a soil test, what you want to do is you want to use as much plastic as possible. And if you want to go down 6 inches or 12 inches, what you're going to do is you can get a shovel and you can pretty much dig a hole. If you want to go down 6 inches, dig it 6 inches. If you want to go 12, you go down 12 inches. And once you have that hole, you scrape the soil from the side of that hole and put all that layer into a plastic bucket. And you do that in a 50 by 50, you do that in like 30, 40 different areas, because you want to get kind of a sampling of that entire area. Because this spot, I know this from experience, isn't going to be the same as this or this or this or this. So what you're doing is you're taking a sampling from all over that, mix it together, and once you get it mixed together, they have a bag that they're going to ask you to put it in. It's a paper bag, and then you send it off with your $15. They have a form that you fill out. If you Google them, they used to have the instructions at their website. But when you send that off, what that lab is going to do is give you an analysis. It's going to tell you how much calcium you have in that area. It's going to tell you how much nitrogen, how much potassium, so on and so on. And once you get that, then they will give you the formula. So they will say 50 by 50, and you did a sample at 12 inches. This is how much calcium you're going to need. Or 50 by 15, you did a 6-inch sample, they'll tell you how much calcium you're going to need. So that would be my recommendation as far as the calcium levels go. The other stuff they're going to send you, I would really not even consider. It's good information to have, but a lot of the stuff that they provide is, I'm 100% organic, so a lot of the stuff they're going to tell you to do is non-organic stuff, and I would just say, forget it. If you have any questions, you can always shoot me an email, and I'd be more than willing to, make suggestions.
I missed the name of the place to get the testing. Where did you recommend that?
It's called the Cleveland Co-op.
Okay, Bradley County Co-op?
Correct. They changed it. I forgot that. Bradley County Co-op.
Okay, just typing it in the chat here. Okay, well, we have 10 minutes left, and then we're going to have to bring this to a conclusion. So I know there's more to talk about plants and weeds and, which plants when and all these questions. But let's pause on that, and we'll have a follow-up meeting on this, Daniel, if you have some time later. But let's just open this up for questions. If you have specific questions that you want to ask, and then maybe next Sunday we could dig into this a little further about which plants to plant, when to plant them, etc. Carla asked a question: if you're going to buy soil, where and what? I think you mentioned just try to find a reputable buyer. He's used BT Hardware up in Cleveland is one supplier that he recommended.
I've not bought soil there, but I bought mushroom compost and worm castings, which I like better actually than the mushroom compost. So, it's a little bit more base, not as acidic as like a mushroom compost, but I like the worm castings better. I make my soil, and like I said, I use basically the native soil that I have. I add sand to it. I will buy peat moss. Peat moss is a good organic material. The best place I find to buy it is actually Lowe's. Lowe's has a larger bag for about the same price as Home Depot. And I will add mushroom compost, and then I just calcium. And if you really want to cheat, which I know sometimes, I think that's more so what Carla is looking for. Udoa Nursery used to have a product called Black Gold. They, I think, are a little bit more expensive. There's a place here in Fort Oglethorpe on Battlefield Parkway called Winwood Bulk. Winwood. You Google Winwood on Battlefield Parkway 2A. And they sell black gold as well. And they had a better price than Ottawa Nursery. And they will deliver by the tandem load. You just have to pay, depending on how far out you are, it will determine what the price is. But for this area, they had one of the best prices for black gold. Black gold is a formula developed by University of Georgia with the Georgia State Extension Office. They've kind of owned that formula, and it's a combination of sand, wood chips, some native Georgia clay, and yeah, so it's a soil. It does break down pretty quickly. So, you know, if you put 2 inches on top of your ground, by next year, you're gonna have, you know, maybe half an inch or so.
So there's a question that's come in here. If you have burning from leaves and trees that you have cut down and cardboard that was burned, can that be used? Like if you've got a pile of it, can you add that onto your garden?
You're talking about ashes?
Yes.
Ashes, actually, ashes will give you potassium, which is a good thing. Like sweet potatoes love potassium. They're big potassium users, and onions and garlic. Sulfur will give your onions and your garlic that really strong pungent flavor. Potassium will give it more of a sweeter flavor. That's why in Vidalia, Georgia, onions are so sweet, because their soil has high concentrations of potassium. So if you want more of an sweeter onion or garlic, you want to have a higher percentage of potassium ashes than you do the sulfur. If you want a little bit more pungent, like a Spanish roll, what is that called? Spanish roll, I think, garlic, which is really strong and pungent, they have higher sulfur concentrations. So, but you have to be careful when you put ashes on. For example, I just added ashes to that area that I was doing, that 10 by 20, and I put probably, I have a 2.5 pound bucket, 2.5 gallon bucket, and I put 5 of them on there, and that for me will be enough for probably this growing season, and then I'll put some more back on it in the fall. You don't want too much ashes, because what it'll do, it will sterilize that soil, because ashes is such a base product that, yeah, it'll basically neuter the soil. It'll make it good for next year, but it'll ruin this growing season.
Okay, what about coffee grounds for compost? Is a question that popped up here.
Coffee grounds is just an organic product. It's just organic. It's good. It's not that it's good or bad. I've used coffee grounds. People gave me some one time, and I put it in there. Any organic matter that you can get in the soil, do it.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. So, okay. Well, we'll probably open a lot more cans of worms here if we ask more questions. Oh, okay, here's a question. Is today a good day to weed and cover? I think the question, that's Nita. Nita, I think you're asking, would today, to put plastic over the weeds? Is that what you're saying? Or to pull the weeds out and then cover it? Yeah, okay. To pull the weeds out and then cover it.
If you're going to cover it, just cover it. There's no need to go out there and pull the weeds unless you're, I'm just trying to save you a step. I mean, if you want the exercise, by all means, go pull the weeds. If you just want to save yourself a step, just cover it. If you want to start working it, you know, if you have a shovel or a digging fork or something, you can go out there and turn it. You can also do that. Just make a hole, turn it. It doesn't have to be deep. It can be shallow, 3 inches, 4 inches, and turn that area, mark it off, and then cover it with the plastic, and that's just going to help you kill the weeds. But by turning it, it's going to start, you know, make it easier for you next time to get in there and start working the area.
So with the ground being so wet, this is probably a decent time to turn it. Would that be, or is that going to kill the microorganisms if we dig down?
If you're just turning it, that's fine. I wouldn't till it. I wouldn't, yeah. And again, that's why I covered mine, is I wanted to be able to work that. It was dry, and I wanted to keep it dry so that I can get out there and plant and work it. but I wouldn't do anything besides turning it. Yeah, simple turn should be fine.
Awesome. Okay. Well, next, I think there's enough information we have to talk about this. We can have another discussion next Sunday if that works with your schedule, Daniel.
Mhm.
And we've run out of time here to go further. So sorry if we didn't get to something that you guys wanted to hear and discuss further. Kevin, thanks for your offer for horse manure. If you deliver, I think you'll get a lot of hands being raised up. They'll take some. I'd have a hard time putting it in the back of my car, but definitely that's nice of you to offer it. So thanks for your time, Daniel. It's good to see you all. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. There's a little bit of sun peeking out here.
Yeah.
Get something done in your yard.